Welcome. I'm glad that you chose to take a little time tonight to join us and learn about the opportunity of serving as a precinct committeeman in your local area. I've been a precinct committeeman in Will County for about 6 years now, and I've really enjoyed the experience of getting to know my neighbors and promoting good, godly candidates to my neighbors and encouraging voter participation. I wish we had a whole lot more conservative representation where I live, but the way the map is drawn, thanks to Michael Madigan and his minions, it's really difficult to, at least especially for the congressional races, the way they've got things drawn to win. But before we really jump into this, I wanted to share a couple things. As Christians, we know that Scripture tells us in Romans 13, verse 1, that all authority is ordained by God, okay? And as I've gone across the state talking to people at different events, whether they be civic groups or if they're men's conferences, women's conferences, or just even church services, I've often run into the problem when people are asked, who's the authority in America? If Romans 13:1 tells us that all authority is ordained by God, who is the authority in America today? And all too often I get the answer that the president is, and that's not a correct answer. I ask them, what are the first three words of the Constitution? And almost all the time, they're able to repeat, oh, yeah, that's we the people. We the people. Then you see the light bulb go on in their head. Oh, so who's the authority in America? We the people. And I would argue that this is the first and foremost reason why Christians really need to be involved in politics and in government in the United States, because the power really is with the people. We have the gift of self-government, and that is a tremendous gift. And if we're not involved, what we're doing is turning over the reins of government to atheists and humanists, and that is not a good recipe. And we could see how that has, because of our uninvolvement, we have allowed our country in our politics to get out of control. So let me give you two more reasons, though. I think there's just not just one reason why Christians need to be involved, but let me give you a close second, if you will. And then I would say a biblical view of love requires it. We all probably know what the great command that Jesus told us was. Love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But he followed that up and said the second is like it. The second is being love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if we truly love our neighbor and are seeking their interests, we want to see good policies implemented throughout the state by our lawmakers. And we want bad policies to be opposed. Now, it's not just the policies, but it's also the people who are writing those policies or introducing those policies. And that's where we come in as precinct committeemen, or those who are working. You get an opportunity to push and to champion godly candidates in your area, because those godly candidates, in all likelihood, are going to be promoting godly or good public policies that will benefit the whole welfare of the nation and not just a select few. And then third, I would just say that we are to be salt and light in this culture. And Scripture says there, if you read it, that we are to be salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? If it is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. And I would say that last part that Jesus was saying, it's good for nothing. Do we really want to be in that position? If we're the salt of the earth and we're not being salty, if we stay in the salt shaker, that the result is going to be we're going to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. And if you see what's going on around us, the tyranny of the government, whether it be the federal government or the state government, Christians are starting to feel as though we're trampled underfoot by men. And so with that background, I am pleased to introduce to you Bob Grogan. Bob, I've had the privilege of working with him before at one of these kind of meetings in DuPage County. He has been twice elected as auditor of DuPage County. He has served as GOP precinct committeeman in DuPage for the last 17 years. He leads new committeeman training for the DuPage Central Committee, and that's why I've asked him here, but he also is very good at this, by the way, where he instructs committeemen on walking precincts and other party duties. Bob and his wife, Beth, have three children and live in Downers Grove. He received his Bachelor's of Arts with majors in economics and political science. So with that said, Bob, I would like to turn this over to you.
All right. So really what it is I think if you're on this call or if you know someone who is just tired of the way things have been going, as David implied, we have the obligation to get involved. I spoke to some folks last night and I said, I'm 47 years old and I've been watching what's been happening in this country. I don't think I can afford another 10 years of Democratic control in the White House. So this is a prime time to get involved and to get activated and to start to move things along. All right, so we're going to talk a couple things. There's lots of ways to get involved. As you can see by this screen here, Illinois Republican Party is somewhat hierarchical. You can, oops, we jumped ahead of me there. There's national stuff, which the issues interest lots of people, but really where it comes down to is precinct level. And so you see down there the base of that triangle is really the precincts, which is in the end it's maybe 200 people or it's 1,000 people in your neighborhood. It depends on geography and where you are, but that's the basic level of touching your neighbor. It's talking across the fences there and getting people involved. And we're going to talk, I'll touch on a lot of issues. So precinct committeemen obviously are working in their precincts, they're working in their local neighborhood. They plug into then the next association, which is a party committee. Now there's, depending on where you are, down in Madison or Williamson and other, some of the more less populated counties, you contact your county party to get involved. Up in the collar counties or in Cook and the city, you're talking about townships more than likely. So we will talk more about how to plug yourself in, but just to get that idea, you're not going to be alone. There is a team to this effort, and you really don't have to invent anything. Everything has been done before. I think it's the obligation of every new generation to think that they're the first ones ever to suffer through things, and they're not. All of these things have been done before. We just may now do them with a couple more clicks as opposed to a couple more knocks, but we're getting there. I'm trying to advance my screen here.
All right, just tell me and I'll do it if not.
All right.
By the way, Bob, you may want to remind people that they could send a chat message. We've got a few more people that have joined us now in the last few minutes here. So
absolutely.
If you have a question, you can send us a chat message. Bob, tell us how.
Yes. So if you move your mouse down to the bottom of your screen, you will see a little pop-up bar, and there is a little balloon thing that says chat. You can click on that, and you just send a message to everyone. If you haven't already done it, I invite people to just sort of identify what town and county that they live in, so we get a little bit of a feel for where people are around the state. So I'm going to start with a couple common terms. Oh, and by the way, we are welcoming questions. Everyone is muted right now, but feel free to type in a question, and we will either, David will stop me as we go along, and I will answer them at that time, or we can definitely get to them by the end. I'm committed to talk as long as people want to listen. Unfortunately, that's the politician in me. But we're going to start off with a couple common terms, just so that we sort of have a base set there. You'll hear the thing, elected committeemen. So committeemen outside of Cook County, and we specifically, what we're talking about today is everything but Cook County. It's kind of, it's like when you talk about the legal system, it's always except for Louisiana, right? Well, in Illinois, it's except for Cook County. So in the other 101 counties, we elect committeemen by precinct. So you will circulate a petition. The requirement is 10 signatures. So it's like 5 couples that live around you. You generally want to get probably 20 signatures to have a little bit of extra just in case. It's always good to have some extra. But that's as complicated as it gets to run for committeeman. I would say 95% of committeemen have no competition. We have a deficit of good volunteers throughout the state. So you're not going to probably have any kind of contested neighborly animosity. So don't worry about that. Just raise your hand and get plugged in and run if you live there.
And it's really simple. I tell people all the time that you are also able to sign your own petition. So you already start with 1 signature, and then you can get your spouse to sign. So you've got 2. All you need is to find 8 more people who like you in the neighborhood.
Right. Sandy just asked, where do we put our town and county? Right where you just typed it, Sandy. So just type in your town and county right there, just so that everybody gets a feel for where everybody is. So what happens sometimes, though, is sometimes we have an abundance of great things, which is, we have more than 1 volunteer that lives in a precinct. And so what we will do is we will take that extra volunteer, that extra committeeman type person, and we appoint them to a precinct where maybe we don't have anybody. And we call them a loop, which is live out of precinct. Now, those people don't have to run. They don't have to do a petition for themselves. And they just get appointed to that spot. If you happen to miss the election cycle, if you, for instance, don't get your petition done and you just decide to be a committeeman, sometime after Thanksgiving, they'll appoint you as a LIP. That's someone who lives in the precinct, and they just didn't happen to run, and so you get to run next time. Everybody serves for 2 years, so you go from one primary to the next primary, so from the governor's primary to the president primary, and then vice versa. So that's the basic terminology for the different types of committeemen. Really, in almost every circumstance, with a few exceptions, doesn't matter what type of committeeman you are treated equally. Your voices are heard, you're appreciated, you're expected to do the same kind of work and volunteer stuff. Now, I've found a lot of times in my presentations, there's a lot of people who have fled Cook County and now live in other parts of the state. So I do like to clarify, when you say committeeman in 101 counties outside of Cook, that's a precinct level. Committeeman in Cook County is a whole township. It's a very large area. It's a very big population. The equivalent in Cook County is called a precinct captain. So just when you talk to your friends in Cook, you say, hey, I'm a committeeman there, all of a sudden they're going to think you can give them a job and some of those kinds of things. And we have different nomenclature out here in the suburbs and the rest of the state. So don't be confused by that. Feel free to advance the card there, Dave.
Okay.
So just a little bit of an understanding here. This is just a crude diagram just to show you the history of what we're dealing with. So the Republican Party, we don't command 51%. We haven't commanded 51% at any time in my lifetime. But neither do the Democrats. Actually, the most prevalent thing are independents. So a lot of what we do is not just talking to Republicans. You cannot achieve 51% by only getting Republicans to vote for someone. You have to actually convince some other people and bring those independents over to the side of the light and away from the dark side, as I like to say. We need to bring them in. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm a person of principles. I'm a conservative, but I really do believe that all good conservatives have to also be able to talk to people who are a little bit more moderate, who maybe differ with them on views. I like to say this: you cannot grow the church by excommunicating all the sinners. We really have to invite everybody in, and the more they listen to our preaching and our sermons, the more likely they are to be converted our way. We cannot yell at them and kick them out and expect ourselves to win elections. Let's go on to the next slide, please.
Okay. By the way, Sandy from Algonquin wants to know, she was a precinct committeeman, appointed one, a loop, but can she find out if she still is?
Certainly. You can do it 2 ways. You can always contact your party. They should know. And then you can, in which county she's in, she's up in Algonquin. So yeah, so you can contact your county clerk or your election commission, depending on which county you're in, and they should have you on file. If you've been appointed in the past, everybody's term expires as a loop or as a lip. Everybody's term expires when the next primary happens, and everybody has to get reappointed. So there is an expiration date on it. You have to sort of keep your hand up there.
Basically every 2 years.
Every 2 years, exactly. So I want to talk generally about the two main philosophical roles of precinct committeeman. And I like to describe them with two analogies. There's the hunter and there's the farmer. The hunter is, that role is you go out and we find our Republicans and we get them to the polls. And the two terms that we use on that is voter ID, which is you identify the voters and what side of the equation are they on. And so sometimes we go and we just talk to our neighbors. Sometimes we do surveys and different things. So we try and figure out who's with us and who's against us. And then GoTV, it's another acronym. That means get out the vote. So it's an old, you got to show up. You got to drive people to the polls. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about some of the ways we do that because we have more tools at our disposal. But so that's the old thing. You're the hunter. You find the prey and you bring them in, right, to feed the family. So that's one role that we've done. I'll tell you, we've actually become a little bit overly dependent on that. That's kind of where the consultants too much want to go, and you spend a bunch of money, you survey people, and you press them to show up. And we've gotten away from what I call the farmer, which is somebody who isn't naturally already a Republican, or they haven't realized that they're a Republican, and we need to grow them into a Republican. Sometimes it's as simple as they've been a lifelong Democrat, and you just need them to just vote for one local candidate. I've had a lot of people tell me, my granddaddy, he was a Democrat, and my dad was a Democrat. They'd roll over in their grave if I voted Republican. Well, I have a good friend down south. He came up with a saying that I really like. He says, "Your granddad voted for Harry Truman. You're voting for Harry Reid." And that's a big difference. And that so you kind of want to emphasize that the Democratic Party has really changed. Those sort of old line traditional Democrats, that was a different ideology that they were voting for back then.
That's right.
So we really need to just talk to our neighbors, and we need to just communicate with them. And I want to emphasize this. I can't emphasize this enough. I'm going to talk about 30 things that committeemen do over the course of a 2-year period. You do not have to do every one of these things to every one of the people in your neighborhood. You cannot physically do that, okay? So we're going to talk about ways of getting some help to do it. And one of the things I really want to emphasize is start out with the people you know, and every year add 10 more houses. And that's very doable to do that kind of thing because it is a game of inches, and we need to just constantly grow it a little bit. We can't try and do everything at every cycle. It's just, you physically can't do it. Let's go on to the next slide. So we talked about, I showed you that graph before, and I talked about, so IDing voters. So it really, in rough estimate, a third of the people call themselves Republicans. A third of the people think they call themselves Democrats. And the last third, we often need to develop an understanding of, okay? They may really be a Republican or they may really be a Democrat, but if they don't vote in primaries, we don't really know which way they are, right? The people who just show up in the general election. So you want to get a sense of your neighbors. And a lot of times that's just talking to them. You're out walking the dog, you see them mowing the lawn, and you just strike up a conversation, and they talk to you about how they're really concerned about increasing taxes, or they're really concerned about, that they're going to take our guns away, or that the social movement in this country is going away from family values. I mean, those are great indications. Wow, this is probably one of our voters, right? And so you want to just start to understand where their head is at. And if they're with us, we're going to try and make sure that we do everything to get them to the polls. Let's move on to the next slide.
Okay.
So when we get them to the polls, that GoTV, get out the vote, there's 3 main ways of doing that. And it's vote by mail. They used to be called absentee ballots. And now it's we call it vote by mail because you don't need excuses anymore. It used to be you had to swear on the dotted line that, oh, I'm going to be out of town that day, or I have to work as an election judge in another precinct. You used to have to swear those things. Now anybody for any reason can vote by mail in their pajamas on their couch. Everybody gets to do that. So we really want to promote that. The Democrats are better at this than we are. Traditionally, I like to share this. Republicans are traditionalists, right? I mean, it makes sense, right? We like the romantic showing up on election day. We really appreciate our liberty and democracy. But bad things happen if you put it off to a single day when life gets in the way. I give an example of, I have a great friend up here in DuPage County. He's the sitting coroner, and he's one of those traditionalists. He likes to vote on election day. And this last go round, it was the local elections. It's a very low turnout election. He was every intention on voting. And his mother got sick, and like a good son, he flew down to Florida and he helped his mother. And you know what? His vote never counted because he wasn't here on election day. So I suggest everyone, whether you end up being a committeeman or not, you follow my mother's advice, which is vote early in case you die before election day. You want it to count. So vote by mail is a great way of doing it. Early voting, same thing. Some people have handicaps, or they're a little slow moving, or they have medical issues, or they're just busy with soccer and things like that. Hey, do it in the middle of the day on an early voting day. Get it out of the way and get it in the bank and be done with it. Because really, if you're on this phone call, you probably already know which way you're going to vote pretty early. You study the issues, so off you go and let's just get that over with and get it in the bank. Victory centers, what that is we often will have phone banking throughout the state. We'll have different centers where maybe you're not good at walking precincts and things like that, and we sit down, give you a phone, we ask you to call people, and you're encouraging them to vote. It could be on election day, it could be before, it could be you're taking these surveys we talked about. So Victory Centers is another way of us sort of ginning up, getting more people to get out and vote. They're effective to a point. At the end of the day, nothing beats good old-fashioned talking to your neighbors. Move on to the next slide. So I touched on this a little bit already. So once again, vote by mail. You don't have to have excuses. This is the best way of increasing turnout. It really is. You can see on the right here, presidential turnout, pretty much that's maximum. It says 75%, but how many of you know people who didn't vote in a presidential election? So it's pretty much that's the top of the game is presidential. Governor cycle, look at that. A third of the people who vote in a presidential cycle don't vote in the governor cycle. That's where you really start to affect things, is being able to get those people who only show up every 4 years. If you can get the Republicans to show up only on presidential cycles, to show up on the governor cycle, we actually can make a difference. We really can. Primaries, you only see about 25% of people show up. Sometimes that's because they don't want to identify themselves. They're a little afraid of both brands. Sometimes they're just busy or lazy. And then the local school boards, and I can't say this enough, where your taxes go, the local elections, so that's schools and villages and fire districts and things like that, that's only at 20% right now. So often those are dominated by people who have stake in those games, who maybe want bigger budgets or higher taxes. So you want to, if we can up those turnouts too, that is probably a really good thing. And a little side note, I put up there, we can track who has already voted. So I will sell to voters, like, you know what, if you're tired of the robocalls, if you're tired of being harassed to go and vote, if you vote, you'll come off the list. Smart campaigns don't pay to keep calling people who've already voted. They can tell that people have already voted. They don't know how they voted. They know that they did. That way you can avoid them voting twice. So that's another incentive for people to vote early. In Republican circles, we just don't vote often. That's our problem. So let's move on to the next one. All right, so back to the farmer issue. So converting voters. Let me start off by giving everybody a little bit of absolution here. I want to tell you, if you don't know the answer to a question you get from a resident, you are all at liberty to say, I don't know the answer to that question. If they want to know somebody's stance on abortion or on gay marriage or on taxes or on Bill 123 down in Springfield or Bill 567 in Washington. If you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know. You can direct them to the campaign. You can go look it up yourself and get back to them. That's one of the biggest things I find that intimidates people, because they don't think they have a command of all the issues. We don't expect anyone to have a command of all the issues. Very few people are as smart as Dave Smith can talk on any issue.
I'll pay you later, Bob. Thanks.
So let's talk a little about converting those voters. So there are Democrats. I said many of them grew up in the city of Chicago. They've moved out this way. I call them DNA Democrats. Or they come out this way. And the reason they come out of the city is because they didn't like high crime. They didn't like the business climate. They didn't like the schools or things that were going on there. So you want to remind people as to why they moved out of the city, or they moved out of some areas that were run by Democrats. And that's a really good way of just starting off a conversation. Let me also say this. Some of my absolute best intentioned committeemen don't listen enough, and they lecture too much. I'll give you an example. I have a great committeeman up my way who, knocked on a door. A Hispanic gentleman answered the door, and my committeeman started right off the bat telling him his opinion on immigration. Okay, and we shouldn't do that. The Democrats are very smart. They listen to people what their issues are, and then they respond to them. Right. Now on immigration, I'll tell you, a lot of Hispanics already agree with the traditional Republican line on that. But it just as an example, you want to listen to them if they're concerned about their kids. Then you talk about the local schools and how the Republicans maybe have given good local schools, or what the Democrats have done to the pension plan for the teachers. Right? There's tailor what you say to what their concerns are, and we don't try not to lecture people.
And half the battle is listening, like you said. I have a friend who's a state representative who said when he was running, that as not an incumbent, as a challenger, he was at somebody's door who wasn't a Republican, and they said they gave a whole list of complaints about what was going on, and Tom just listened, and he listened, and he listened. And you know what? At the end of it, she said to him, okay, just because you listened, I'm voting for you.
We don't do it enough. And I mean, we don't do it enough in our marriages probably, and we also don't do it enough in our politics.
That's a good point.
So it's something for all of us to learn. And people, there's some Democrats who are just, they just hate us because they want to be hateful, and that's fine. And you don't waste your time with them. Independents, a lot of times they're not ideological. So once again, get them to come over on a local person. I am very quick. If they really mad at what the Republicans in Congress are doing, or the Republican presidential person, you know what? But tell them about your local person. Hey, there's a guy running for judge or a gal running for county board. They're a good friend of mine. People don't know who to vote for. They figure out their own self for president and Congress a lot, but they're looking for a little advice. And if you're the person that lives down the street and you say you like Judge so-and-so, then that's good enough for them. I always win my recommendations on local candidates because people just, they trust my advice. And I will bet you that you're all people, your neighbors will trust yours as well. So independents, when you're talking to them, you're going to probably try and be a little bit less ideological and a little bit more practical. Don't ignore the young people. We need to talk to young folks. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so it's good to get to know your precinct. That's the number one thing you're doing, is getting to know the people that are there. You do represent the GOP. Sometimes you get flack for things that are going on that you have nothing to do with, and that happens to all of us. But you know what? You have to just soldier through and just represent the best you can for the candidates that you're the proudest. So. There is innumerable things to do as far as party duties. We're going to talk about some of them. The nice thing is, whatever your skill set is, I think you can plug that in, and you don't have to do all of these things. So don't freak out about the list ahead of us. Go on the next one. We talked about whether you all have to agree, and I do like to emphasize this. I think as thoughtful people, that's why you're on this phone call, you have good, solid, principled opinions. And you look at sometimes elected officials who you may very disagree with. You really do. I can name a few, and I won't out them right here on a recorded phone call, who I have major disagreements with as how they vote. So here's what I say. You can still be a committeeman. There are 20, 25 people running on any ballot. You don't have to go and give an affirmation to everyone on there. Talk about the ones that you do feel passionate about. Talk about that local person. Talk about your congressman if you like them. You don't have to sell everyone 100%. So don't be concerned with that. Once again, if you happen to have a different spin on an issue, that's fine too. Ronald Reagan said, if you agree with us 80% of the time, you're my friend. And so this is not a monolithic, it's not a litmus test kind of job. You really get to just be an honest broker for your own beliefs in your own neighborhood.
That's right.
All right, so to do these things, you don't have to do them alone. You can create your own team. So a lot of times precinct committeemen get to nominate election judges. You definitely get to pick your own assistant committeemen or block captains, as it were. Those are things that you get to go and have those people help you. You can recruit your own poll watchers, drivers, envelope stuffers. I assume people remember Mrs. Kravitz from was it Bewitched? Always staring in the window. It's great to have a few of those ladies on your side because they can tell you, oh, the Smiths just moved out of their house, down the way. We've got new people are moving in. Maybe you can register them to vote. It's great to have people who give you information on what's going on in the neighborhood. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, so one of the duties that you do have is voter registration. And I have to tell you, there's nothing more heartwarming than getting a nice 17-year-old or 18-year-old young man or young lady and getting them to vote. Yes, and they raise their right hand and they fill out the paperwork and they get to be a fully enfranchised citizen. I have a niece. I'm going to get choked up here for a second. I have a niece who is 17 and she is going to be eligible to vote in the next election. She has Down syndrome, and all she will talk about is that her Uncle Bob is going to register her to vote, and she's going to vote for her Uncle Bob. And there is nothing more heartwarming than young people being excited about this country and being participants in it. How to do voter registration? A whole other class. Don't worry about it right now, but just know that you will be empowered as a committeeman to do that in your county where you live. Let's go on to the next one. So now, even if you're not a committeeman, you actually you can still help register voters. You can register yourself online. So if you go to the Secretary of State's website, you can download this form. And this form here, you can actually do without being a technical registrar. So this is available to everybody. You can do this in a partisan manner. You could do it, at the local church organization. You can do it at a Republican booth. So this is available to people who aren't even committeemen. So I just wanted to sort of mention that is out there. You need as many people to register to vote. Go to the next one, please. All right. So candidate support petitions. Right now it's petition season. So I have to sort of mention this. This is sort of a bread and butter activity of committeemen. If you don't like talking to people, maybe committeeman's not going to be your job, right? Because you kind of have to. You don't have to sell them. You don't have to ask for money, but to have that clipboard in hand and knock on 20 doors in your neighborhood and ask people to just sign a piece of paper to give them more choice in the election. And so this is a very normal thing to do. It's very easy. You can have a party, you have people come over to your house. Halloween's coming up. You can do that. It's pretty straightforward, but this is a bread and butter thing that committeemen are asked to do. Let's move on. And once again, all these things we can go more in depth. Once you become a committeeman, we can talk more about that stuff. So other candidate support, you can hold coffees and luncheons and things. You can send letters to the editor. It's all that normal stuff that you've probably done in a school board election or things like that. You can find sign locations. You can be the sign guy, who knows how to get all the signs out in the neighborhood. That's a great thing. Whatever your talent is, the Republican Party will take from you. And they will take, whether it's treasure, shoe leather, doesn't matter. We will find a way for you to help out.
Right. And then again, press, Bob, that these are optional things that you can do if you have the time.
Exactly. If you're good at social media, you can do it that way. None of these things are mandatory. All these things are just ways that it's your skill set. Go ahead and do it. All right, next slide.
Yeah, the last thing we want to do is scare anybody off with all the.
Right, exactly. And I got to emphasize that again. You really, at the end of the day, I think that you can be a good committeeman and give, maybe 20 hours a year. I mean, really. I mean, so that's less than a half an hour a week, doing what you really need to do, which is trying to get people to show up for an election. At the end of the day, that's the basic thing. We can always do that a little bit better, and that's what a lot of these other things are about. So here we are, walking your precinct, right? Some people, they're in rural areas, and so they call their precinct. That's perfectly acceptable. Some people will hang out at the Denny's and see everybody that they know and do it that way. That's good too. But it's just going out and finding additional, 10 people here, 10 people next cycle. Bill Brady lost by about 10,000 votes. That was one vote per precinct in Illinois. One vote. So a good precinct committeeman went out and got one more person to vote. One more. Everybody else was going to vote anyway. One extra person. If everybody had done that, and we'd have precinct committeemen in every place, Brady would have won, and we wouldn't have had what we've had, in Illinois for so many years. So really, it's incremental. Don't worry about throwing touchdown passes every time. You got to get first downs. So meet the new couple that moves in, introduce yourself, and you got couple more people who are going to be listening to you.
Sandy asked, what is a rotating clipboard?
Sure. So what it is a lot of times you have 20 candidates running in the petition world. And to make somebody sign 20 pieces of paper, they're not going to do it. So what I end up doing is I'll have them sign 3 people, and then when I walk away from their house, I'll rotate my clipboard and take a different 3 and put them on top, and then I'll have the next person sign a different 3 petitions, because you have Congress and county board and all these other things running. So I go to sometimes my brother-in-law's house. I make him sign all 20. But your average people, you don't necessarily beg them to do that much. So when you're out walking, and move on to the next one here.
Okay.
And once again, we can teach. We can go into a lot more depth. I'm going to give you guys my phone number at the end of the day, so you can always call me and ask for advice on these things. What I always do is, and I think this is real bread and butter. You give people, you hand out literature. A lot of times candidates literature, and you give that simple letter from you to your neighbor, and you say who you're voting for. You give a sample ballot. And people really respond to that. People want it, and I'm very soft with it. These are the people I'm voting for. And then it said people will follow your suit because they haven't done the research on the judge. They haven't done the research on the school board member or something like that. So what I provide to them is my research that I've already done. And I share that with my neighbors. And I can tell you I never lose the local races. And so that's really what all this walking is sharing your advice to your neighbors, and you would be surprised how much the response is. I always, when I do my sample ballot, here's the little trick. I always do it with like a funny color. And so when I'm sitting there on election day at the polling place, I watch people come in with my funny colored sample ballot. I watch a husband hand it to a wife in the voting booths, and they just use my sample ballot to know who to vote for. And it's so rewarding to see them actually taking your advice.
Great idea.
So on election day, you probably want to be available if you can. Not every committeeman has to be, but you're helping put out some signs. You're maybe bringing donuts to your judges. Maybe you're doing some poll watching. You're driving seniors to the poll. All these things are maybes. You don't have to do any one of them, but those are things that on election day we do. We call people. That's part of the poll watching stuff. And move on to the next one if you don't mind. Next screen. So when we poll watch, we figure out who's already voted, and then we check them off a list, and then we go back and we call the ones that haven't voted yet. And it's very, that will get another 2 or 3% turnout, which once again for Bill Brady or any of these other close races that we've had, that will be the difference. Is just, hey, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Notice you haven't voted yet. Leaving a voicemail. Please remember the polls are open until 7. As long as you're in line, you get to vote. It's going to be a close election. And they'll go, I told that Bob Grogan I would vote. I will. They get home, they've had a bad day at work, and they get back in the car and they go and vote. And if you do that, 2 or 3 people in every precinct, we win more elections. And Madigan doesn't have the power that he has.
Yes.
So poll watching also, particularly in Democratic areas, you got to watch for fraud. And there's a whole lot of things, as David and I said at the beginning of the thing, in case you came in late, we're going to do a whole other seminar on poll watching and an election judge. But there's lots of tricks. I'm actually a certified fraud examiner in my day job. So we can talk about lots of things they do. We're not going to make you experts on that here. You can be some experts on that over time. But that's some of the things you do in poll watching is you're watching stuff and reporting it up the food chain if something goes wrong. Let's go on to the next one. After the election, okay, so we've done all this work, and after the election, sometimes you go and send a thank you letter. Sometimes you share some, information with your neighbors. How things did. Take down the signs, and that's it. Hopefully I didn't scare anybody away. It's, it's interesting. Some people are really busy one year, so you can't do as much, and so the team at the local party will help you walk your precinct because you don't have much time. And then vice versa. Hey, I got some extra time on my hands. I'm an empty nester or whatever. And, so you go and help an elderly committeeman down the road and you help them. So we don't have enough bodies. We don't have enough people that are giving their time. So any time you give is an additive to, helping principled people get elected. And I can't emphasize that enough. If we don't have principled committeemen who put in a little bit of effort, we don't get principled candidates, and we don't get principled government.
That's right.
So let's go on to the next one. Oh, and here we are. We're at the end of our very short, abbreviated what to expect. So we have a couple phone numbers. You have my private phone number here. You have IFA's phone number. And if any of you are interested in anywhere in the state, you can go to that's the Illinois GOP's website. We are Illinois. And I would look up who your county people are. They all have their Facebook link or their website or maybe their phone number, and reach out to them. Now, if they don't call you back, or if you have trouble finding them, call myself, call David. 2 things. 1, I probably know somebody that I can plug you into. 2, if they're not calling you back, then they really obviously need your help, because it means that they're not doing what they should be doing, which is returning phone calls and getting things done. So that just even is a symbol of you need to get involved.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you, Bob, so much. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask? Again, you can send a question to us through the group chat. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. Send a chat message to me, to Bob, to everyone. Any questions about running for precinct committeeman, about the duties of precinct committeeman?
So while we're waiting for some questions there, just a couple of quick things. And we have, you can have an 18-year-old precinct committeeman and you can have an 88-year-old precinct committeeman. We have precinct committeemen who are in wheelchairs, who are great. They sit there on the phone, and I will tell you, they will call everybody and their brother to do things. Oh, good question. What is the deadline for running? So precinct committeeman petitions, the first day that you can hand those petitions in, which to recap, you only need 10 signatures. You probably should get 20 signatures. So that's just 2 sheets of paper. The first day to file is the Monday before Thanksgiving. I believe the last day to file is the Monday after Thanksgiving. Give or take a day or so, but it's near the end of November. And you can get those petitions from your county clerk or from your local party. And they're very simple. I mean, it's literally filling in your name, filling in your address, and you got to get it notarized at the end when you're done passing it. So your notary is going to stamp a couple things to make sure that you are who you say you are. But it's a very simple process. And I invite you, if you're doing your petitions, to grab some other candidate petitions. It's presidential cycle. You get a lot of people. The presidential candidates need to get on the ballot. There's a lot of great candidates that are out there. And so, pass a couple more. It's a great way of interrupting somebody's day. You're not asking for money. You're not asking for anything hard. It's like, hey, let's put some names on the ballot, and people generally like that. So I really encourage you to just pass a couple petitions in addition to your own.
Right. And then Linda asked, where do we get petitions? And you answered that. But again, you can get it at your local Republican headquarters or at the county headquarters, right?
Right. So the clerk's office, or depending on a couple of the counties, they have election commissions, but it's always through the county offices that you can go and get that done. All right. Yes, so that's a good question. I see Paul's question. And yes, so we do have families that end up holding multiple precincts. Here's the thing. If you have a great organization and everything is full, and there's no open precincts, then I would suggest your wife and your son help you in your precinct, because it's much easier. Instead of you talking to however many people you need to talk to, you only have to do a third of them, right? And truly, I have young children. I bring them along in the little red wagon, and it's a much easier door knock, much less intimidating when I have the little kid with me. But yes, you can have them. They can run in other precincts. They have to live in a precinct to run in it, but they can be appointed to other precincts if there's vacancies there. So to run, you have to live in the precinct.
Okay, Bob, we've got a question. Best way to research candidates? Well, I'll let you answer that, but first let me jump in and say, well, Illinois Family Institute puts out a voter guide for statewide and congressional elections and even state legislative elections. So that's one way. Illinois Family Action, which is hosting this, we have an online voter guide that you can look at. And then Bob, you probably have some suggestions too.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So there are a lot of great of those online things, but one of the wonderful things about a committeeman and the role as committeeman is, they'll have probably monthly meetings, maybe a meeting every couple months, and elected officials will come to you. And there is nothing like saying to that neighbor, I met Judge Brennan, and this is what, my impression of him. He seems like a very fair gentleman. I met Representative Ives. I was talking to her about this thing. I generally, when I have a live group physically in front of me, I always tell them, I said, I'm going to give them a little bit of advice, and I'll give it to you guys virtually here. There is a tendency of elected officials to go to meetings and stand in the back of the room and talk to other elected officials. It's human nature. They talk to the people that they know. It's easier. They're kind of all in the same sort of career kind of things, and so they talk to their coworkers. I give everyone on this call permission to go and interrupt any two elected officials talking at a party meeting. and interrupt them and just say, hey, I'm Committeeman so-and-so. I'm over here in Downers Grove or in Wheaton or in Peoria. And I just wanted to ask you about the flooding problem or whatever it is. And I guarantee you this, you will get two reactions. One, they will answer your question because they want to and this stuff. Or maybe 1 in 50, you get a snarl and they'll be a little bit mean to you. If any elected official snarls at you, first off, they don't deserve your support anymore. And secondly, call me. My number is on the screen, and I will personally call that elected official, because the reason they are there is to talk to the committeeman and not talk to the other elected officials.
That's right. You bring up a great point. Once you are a precinct committeeman, you're meeting with the regular township Republicans. And Bob is right. The candidates come to you because they want you to promote and pass their literature to your neighbors. And they'll sit there for an hour while you pepper them with questions.
Yep.
So you want the best way to research candidates? Well, right from the horse's mouth, I would say.
I'll just, as an example, the township that I operate out of, it's called Downers Grove Township. It's up in DuPage County. I have, as one of my state reps is Jim Durkin, the minority leader, and one of my state senators is Christine Rodonio. So we have a lot of people who, you definitely want to put in a corner and go, okay, I have a real serious question for you. And it's a great opportunity for those things. Now, Bill Deal asked a good question. How do you know if that position is open? So there's two ways. First, the way I really think is the best way is you talk to the local party. You may have somebody who, for instance, maybe it's not open at this moment, but they've announced that they're not going to run again. The gentleman's 80, the lady is maybe not feeling well anymore, and so they're not going to run again. But they currently actually hold the position. They're looking for someone to replace them. The only one that's going to know that is the party. So I would call the party first. You can always call that clerk or the election commission at the county and ask them if there's somebody in precinct 52 in Downers Grove Township or something like that. But talk to the party, even if it's not available. That lady, who maybe isn't getting around as much as she used to, maybe she needs help. And a great way, you don't have to be a committeeman, you can be an assistant committeeman. It's a great way to start. It's a great way of not having to do everything I said. You only get to do half the things I said. So go ahead and share that responsibility and help somebody else out.
That's right. And you've really got a 50-50 chance of the precinct being vacant, right, Bob?
Yes, you do. And truly, there's also been a lot of precincts that get redrawn from time to time. So if you've never had a precinct committeeman come to your door, that may be because you don't have a good precinct committeeman, or it may be that they just redrew the lines and you're going to have a good one next time. So you just have to go and ask those questions.
Here's a good question for you, Bob.
Yeah.
How large are we talking about? What precincts? What's the average size of a precinct?
By statute, they're supposed to have less than 1,000 voters.
Yeah.
And they generally will have more than a couple hundred. But now that includes Democrats. That includes people who are away at college and different things like that. So it's going to vary from place to place. Sometimes you have apartment buildings that they're hard to get into, in which case you're trying to find someone in that apartment building to help you in. Sometimes there's nursing homes. It varies a lot. But really, if you can affect 30 houses, that's a great start. That's it. If you just, I'm telling everybody, go make houses or friends with 30 houses, and you'll be a good committeeman, and build from there. How to find out? I see that Tim Denner asks, how do you find out what township you live in? One, you can probably look at your tax bill. Two, you can always call your clerk or election commission, and they will tell you. And probably your party could tell you as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bob. Okay, Paul says, you said were two ways to find out if the position is available. What's the second way, and how do you contact the party?
Sure. So at the bottom of this screen right here, there's a website, and you can also just Google Illinois GOP, and you just go to the counties section, which is what this is here. That should give you links to most of the county parties, and then from there you can just drill down. Some of them have Facebook pages, some of them have websites. Sometimes just Google a phone number. But you can start here with the weareillinois.org. So you contact the local party or contact your county clerk or election commission, depending on which county you're in. They should be able to tell you what precinct you're in, and they probably even will be able to give you a phone number for the local party as well. And truly, if you have a problem, call Bob Grogan. My number is on there. Feel free to call me. It doesn't matter. I really I get the greatest satisfaction out of getting more volunteers here at the state, anywhere in the state is what I want to do. So call me and I'll know somebody and I'll get you plugged in.
You are fantastic, Bob. Thank you for putting yourself out there for us. And did I say this before? Bob's a great guy. Bob's a great guy. Hey, listen, also, Brad Holbrook gave us a link, and you may want to copy that in your chat room before you leave. You'll find a place to get petitions there as well. Now, if there's any other questions, please feel free to send them in now. And I'm going to just have a few announcements real quick. And the first one is that next Saturday, not this Saturday, we're going to have a Jericho prayer march around the governor's mansion. We're going to be praying and demanding that Governor Runner defund Planned Parenthood in Illinois. So if you can join us between 11 and noon, we will march around the governor's mansion and have a pro-life rally and prayer march. Next one, I just want to bring to your attention, if you're interested in worldview, we're going to be having a worldview conference with Dr. Wayne Grudem for one day, Saturday, February 20th. We'll have 4 sessions, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and then a quick Q&A. If you're a pastor, please join us for a free breakfast with Dr. Grudem, but you need to RSVP for that so we know how much food we need to cater in. And then lastly, we are going to have a symposium on Common Core, and that will be with Dr. Duke Pesta, and that's going to be in April. So if you want to throw those things on your calendar, that would be wonderful. It'll also be on the events page for Illinois Family Institute. With that said, I want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us today. Bob, any last words?
Yes, I'm going to say it doesn't matter how much time, what your skills are, anything you do to advance your principles in the democratic process will be helpful. So just find a local party person and get yourself involved, whether it's an hour a year or it's 100 hours a year. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your skill set. It doesn't take money. You can just plug in any way you can, and they should be very thankful for anything you can do.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes, again, I've said this before, and you probably saw it on one of the emails, comes from John Adams, our second president. He was writing a letter to his son, John Quincy Adams, and he said, "Public business, my son, must be done by someone. If wise men decline it, others will not. If honest men decline it, others will not." Boy, Bob, would you say that we need wise and honest men in government helping to run things and get godly people elected?
Wow, I think that this time the need is greater than it ever has been before.
Okay, sounds good. One last question. What's Bob's role within the party?
I'm a humble committeeman up here in Downers Grove Township. I just do training and try and get people as activated as can. I'm running for re-election as county auditor, but I just try and help people wherever I can.
Yep, and so we thank you, Bob. God bless everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. That concludes our program tonight. Thank you. Bye-bye.